Thank you for tuning in and welcome back to the Sandwich of Coherency. So, let's just go ahead and jump right into this. Tonight, I've got a couple clips from Jason Smith. And, he goes further into what we keep talking about with the Democrats and their excessive spending. And it's just insane. I give numbers and I try and point these things out, and it's still, you tell people these things and it's amazing how many people don't get how bad the government spending is. This money doesn't just come out of the blue. This inflation, this constant printing, this overprinting of American dollars is on purpose. The Biden administration is basically inflating the economy because they have some crazy attempt to pay off some debt. This will bankrupt people. And I know you've all heard it. I've heard it time and time again that the middle class is dwindling away, and soon there won't be a middle class. It'll be just upper class and lower class. And the way the Democrats tell it to you is that, this is the fault of greedy corporations and businesses and rich people. And I will say that they probably play some part in that. But I'd say the biggest culprit is the federal government and its excessive spending. Or let me rephrase that. The federal government and its excessive borrowing, because the federal government, as we pointed out time and time again, has no money to spend. They're just borrowing money and using the labor of American citizens as the collateral. Well, there's not enough collateral left. And it just seems, as each day goes on, that the White House, this current administration, is selling the citizens of this country out to some kind of global scheme. They've pandered to every country around the world that winks their eye at them. But for their American citizens, they seem to have deaf ears. The White House's ears are deaf to the wants and the needs of its own citizens. But what they do hear is the cries and the shouts of an idea to oppress certain groups of people in order to gain more votes. Because that is what this Democratic Party has become. Divisive. And they don't have policies that they can run on. Their policies are thinner than paper. So they run on identity politics. Most of what their politics are is just simply based off of people's different identities. Whatever that may be. Whether it be religion or anything else. But that's what they go with. And that's what they keep using as a means to get themselves reelected and back into office. As they continue to borrow more money, and as they borrow and borrow, their constituents get poorer and poorer. And they literally turn around and tell you to stop being so poor. This is coming from the Democratic Party. These are the people that you elected, America. This is the president that you elected to lead. These are the people that are telling you, person struggling to make ends meet, struggling to be able to pay for fuel to get to work. They are the ones. Pete Buttigieg, all of them. AOC, Kamala Harris, they're all telling you to stop being poor. Oh, you can't afford fuel? Just go buy an electric car. You that is struggling to be able to pay for fuel to be able to get to work, you just need to go drop 56 grand on an electric car. And then you won't have to worry about these fuel prices. Stop being so poor. Oh, and what they tell you? These rising prices are good for the non-rich. These are good for you. All these things that they've told you were good for you are not good for you. We've seen this time and time again in previous regimes around the world. We don't have to keep calling them out by name. But let's just say that their citizens are all trying to get out of those regimes and make their way into the United States. But unfortunately, those people do not know that we have politicians in office that cannot control their spending. They think that the millions upon millions of Americans are their own personal little piggy banks. And that's how they treat the people. Well, let's just go ahead and jump right into this, because I will say that Jason Smith explains it very, very well, just how deep the federal government's disdain for its own citizens goes.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today's rule is an all too familiar pattern of the legislative laziness for my Democrat colleagues. Once again, Washington Democrats are hiding their spending from the American people. They are smuggling their spending levels to the upcoming appropriations process into a rule for a totally unrelated bill, so they don't have to debate or defend their out-of-control spending habits. Last year, Democrats did the exact same thing. The chairman of the Budget Committee drafts a spending resolution. He skips over his committee, and then they toss it into a rule, hoping no one notices. At no point in the last 4 years of the majority have House Democrats actually marked up a budget in the Budget Committee. Time and again, House Democrats have acted with as little sunlight as possible because they don't want to be held accountable for their record. Americans know that Washington spending is driving inflation, and now Democrats are calling for even more. Last year alone, House Democrats voted for $7.5 trillion in new spending, including the $2 trillion so-called rescue plan that ignited the highest inflation in 4 decades. Since President Biden took office and one-party Democrat control of Congress in Washington, inflation is up 11%. Gas prices are up 110% on their watch. President Biden's 2021 deficit was the second highest in history, $517 billion more than the CBO. Democrats, they don't want to debate budgets. They certainly don't want to debate the president's budget, which would spend $73 trillion over the next decade, a 66% increase over the past decade. It would add $16 trillion in new debt, as well as $1 trillion annual deficits every year. Democrats don't want to talk about budgets because they're spending like they simply don't exist. If Democrats won't show their cards, allow me. The resolution that is tucked away in this rule has over $1.6 trillion in discretionary spending next year, $132 billion, or a 9% increase over the most recent fiscal year 22 omnibus. It is $21 billion more in spending than even Biden's budget proposal.
I mean, come on, how much money do these people have to keep borrowing before people get the hint? All this money they've spent, all this money they've borrowed, and the American citizen keeps getting poor. And they keep turning around back to you and saying, we just need to spend a little bit more. We just need to spend a little bit more. None of their spending is benefiting the citizens. Granted, the Republican spending is not the greatest, but damn, geez. Right now, this nation needs some fiscal conservatism. At this rate of spending, the United States cannot sustain itself. Countries that have continued excessively printed money have destroyed themselves, and their citizens are living way below the poverty levels. Like, we're talking eating your pets kind of poverty levels. You know, this is just getting completely out of hand. And it absolutely needs to be reined in. And like Jason Smith said, you know, one party control. I hope that members on the left are able to see this, and some of them are wise enough to come to their senses and stop this before it continues to keep going. I mean, past 4 years, they haven't marked up a budget. That is a problem, especially when you consider the amount of spending they've done. With that $7 trillion, like you said, including the $2 trillion rescue plan, how many Americans has it rescued, considering that more Americans are still losing their livelihoods? So which Americans did it benefit? Did it benefit American citizens, or did it benefit foreign entities operating in the United States, being classified as American citizens because they're operating in the United States? Because the money didn't go to the people. They threw a measly $1,200 here and there. You know, didn't Biden promise the people of Georgia all $2,000 if they voted for him? How many of you got that money? Nobody, I would suppose. But let's close this out with Janet Yellen, you know, the Treasury Secretary, that is highly underqualified for her job. And if she is qualified for her job, the problems that are happening under her watch have got to be basically because of the decisions that she has made.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, it is a pleasure to finally have you before our committee. I know we have a short period of time, so I'll just get into the questions real quick. Do you see any role for fiscal restraint in combating inflation?
I do. Our budget proposes deficit reduction. Deficits have come down, but especially in light of the inflationary situation,
So,
I think there should be further deficit reduction.
so fiscal restraint does affect inflation. I appreciate that. You said yes. The deficit last year, what was it? Was it 2.78 trillion?
Probably.
Yeah, that's what we have from the Budget Committee. And that is the second largest deficit in the history of this nation. So when you have the second largest deficit in the history of our nation, the year following surely is going to be a deficit reduction. I will also point out that the deficit that was brought forward last year was $517 billion more than what the Congressional Budget Office said it would be prior to passage of the $2 trillion American Rescue Plan. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure I understood quite the numbers you gave, but certainly the rescue plan did.
The deficit last year ended up to be $517 billion more than what the Congressional Budget Office informed us would be prior to passage of the $2 trillion American Rescue Plan. We had numerous economists, especially Democrat economists that worked for President Obama, that said that if you would pass that $2 trillion American Rescue Plan, we would see the highest inflation in a generation. And in fact, we have. We've seen the highest inflation in my lifetime. The last time we've seen inflation this high was when I was born. And so most Americans are definitely facing that. Since Joe Biden took the oath of office, inflation has gone up 11%. And I know people keep saying that 8.3% was year to year last month, but for the people back home that's listening, what they care about is gas prices are double since Joe Biden took office. They care about eggs being up 22%. They care about bacon being up 17%. They care about chicken being up 16%. They care about bread being up 14% year to year. That's what's affecting real Americans. I also want to ask a quick question. Do you think it's acceptable that private taxpayer information has been shared and reported publicly?
I'm not aware of any private, there is the ProPublica.
And that was a year ago today, was the ProPublica leak.
We don't know that it was a leak. We don't know how that information got into the public domain.
It's a freaking leak. Oh my God. We don't know if it was a leak. We don't know how it got into the public domain. That's a freak, because somebody leaked it. Look, I'm not trying to be mean here, but she is just a fish swimming with sharks here. You know, and I look at this woman as somebody's grandmother. She should be at home with the grandkids or something. No, because I'm sorry, just her performance since she's been in the position has been terrible. She needs to be removed from office. You know, this is a person, mind you, this is a person who decided not to come to testify before committees when asked. She has avoided them for the most part since she's been in office, and sent people from her office to answer on her behalf, which actually, believe it or not, is against the law. She is legally bound to come before the committee when she is asked. So she's broken many, many laws, many, many times. She is an absolute violation. But hey, at least they got her to show up this once. And again, she's showing pure incompetency. And I can't sit here and say, well, maybe, you know, we should take it easy on her. No, not at all. This is the Secretary of the Treasury. She is supposed to be on it. She is supposed to know what is going on. And she has no idea. She's actually said this before. She has no clue what's going on. And that's the problem with this White House administration now. You have a whole bunch of people running around and nobody has any clue what is going on. There's no captain. And they all think they are the captain. And they are sinking the ship called America. There are holes that need to be plugged, but they just keep making them bigger. It's as if they want to destroy the United States just so they can turn around and say, this wouldn't have happened if you had just done what we said, but because you didn't do what we said, we did this. So this is all your fault. And basically gaslight the nation. And that just seems to be what's coming out of this White House. And I just hope that America, you're listening. And I hope this is just, I hope this helps people to understand that as bad as it is, you might think that the right is, the left is working overtime to drive its constituents into poverty for their own good, as they put it. But, again, we're going to see what else they try next. There's always something more to come, and we will be back with that. A little bit more, a little bit later. But I thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.